Story is told about a famous child psychologist who was a family man, had a wife and a couple of kids. His kids were quite young. And one day he comes home from work and he's having his garage repaved. The garage, the driveway, it's all being repaved with fresh concrete. And it's costly and expensive and it's a big job. And he's just finished laying down the concrete, and one of his little children come running out and start running right into the fresh concrete. So he looks at the kid and he starts screaming, "What are you doing? Why are you in the fresh concrete? I just laid it down, and how much money it cost, and how long it took." And his wife hears the commotion. She comes running out. She says, "I don't understand something. You're a child psychologist. That's the way you talk to your own child? Something doesn't make sense." She says, "Listen, in my practice, there I'm talking about how to deal with children in the abstract. Here I'm talking about how to deal with children in the concrete." And the reality is that they are two different realities completely. We live life with a vision of duality, a dual vision. There's the life we wish we led, the life we dream of living, and there's the life we actually live. And the fact that we have these two different realities and trying to merge them and live in both places at once is extremely difficult, probably impossible for any human being to do. And that's what this psychologist is experiencing. Philosophically, intellectually, ideally, does he think you should scream at a child? No, of course not. No one does. But in that actual moment, everything gets thrown out the window. And all he can see in front of him is the reality that he spent hours and hundreds of dollars to lay down fresh concrete, and that has been ruined by these children. Whether they're his or anybody else's is irrelevant at that point. This is the task of trying to take what we know to be true, what we know to be the right way, and implementing it to actually living it, similar to what we were talking about before. And this is something that I myself deal with all the time. Someone that might know tradition is valuable and appreciate the significance of every mitzvah that they do, and yet I find myself struggling at times to fully appreciate and take the full measure out of a specific action that I'm doing, whether it be a davening or a blessing or a practice, whatever it might be. Sometimes the moment itself seems to flow you by and you get caught up in something else. And so you have one reality that you know that exists usually up here, and another reality that's getting practiced somewhere down here, somewhere down below. And this is the dual vision that we have. And this dual vision is not something that exists only in our spiritual life. It really exists in every aspect of our life. When we're kids, we have a vision of what we're going to do when we're going to get older. We're going to be a firefighter, or an astronaut, or a pilot. We're going to save the world. And then as we start to get older, that vision changes. And maybe somewhere deep down in the back of our mind, we still maintain a little bit of that dream, of that fantasy, but we also learn that it's probably a fantasy and we have to get realistic. So we become something else. And we live doing that job thinking or wishing we were doing something else, something more in line with what we dreamed of when we were children. The same is in our relationships, in our marriages. We marry someone, we develop a relationship with that person, and yes, we think that it's going to be all patches and roses, and it's not. There are ups, there are downs, there are obstacles, there are struggles, constant moving forward and backward in the same moment sometimes. And that's the reality that we live, contrary to the reality we dreamed of when we first got married. Same thing can be said for raising children. When you see children, you say, well, they're that person's children. They don't know how to be a parent. But if I had children, I would know how to discipline them. I would know how to connect with them. I would know how to reach them. my kids would march like little soldiers. But you eventually get to that stage in many cases, and you realize that it's not the case. And what you planned or dreamed is different. Your child doesn't respond necessarily to the tools you thought were perfect, and you have to adapt. And your child doesn't want to go to your alma mater. Do you know how many parents pressure their kids to go to their college? It is amazing, absolutely amazing. And we're not talking about situations where, let's say you grew up in Tampa and you went to the University of Florida and you want your kid to go to the University of Florida because in addition to it being your school, you also get a savings because it's an in-state college. We're talking about where there's no incentive except for the fact that it's the school that I went to. Now, why would you try to encourage your child to make a decision that could potentially shape their future? This is 4 years of their life, maybe more, simply around the fact that you went to that school. But the reality is, because it's part of your fantasy. It's part of the reality that you conjured up before you had this child. Before you had your child, you're probably already dreaming, he's going to go here, he's going to go there, and then he'll go to the college, and he'll do this. And that's why you want him to go to that college, because that's the college that you went to, and that's how your vision is expressed. Of course, does it often happen? No. This concept of living a dual reality, of seeing the life from different lenses and trying to merge the two, can be traced back to Plato. The Greek philosopher Plato, who lived about 530 years before the Common Era, so during the time of the First Temple, was a brilliant man. Silence your phones. Was truly a brilliant man and very accomplished philosopher. Now, Plato didn't believe, similar to all Greek philosophers and scholars at the time, that the only pursuit was a physical pursuit. Typically, when you think of Greek attitudes, especially the Roman philosophers that came later that were born from the Greeks, you think of people that engaged in mass materialism to the point where it was obscene. And people that had literally no care for anything spiritual, anything apart from themselves. That's what you typically think of when you talk about Greek philosophy. Make yourself comfortable. But Plato, we're talking about Plato with a T. Plato was very, very different. Plato was a man that did appreciate the abstract. Plato was a man that saw the world through two lenses. He saw ideas and he saw the practical application. And he felt that ideas were more important than the practical application, because ideas, concepts, live forever. But the way they're actually expressed constantly changes. So I'll give you an example. To him, a chair, this chair, that chair, was insignificant. It had very little value. You can make 100 kinds of chairs, 1,000 kinds of chairs. And the chair eventually will rot, be reupholstered 100 times, but eventually it's gone. But the concept of a chair is that you create some sort of structure for someone to sit on. That concept is eternal. It never dies, it never changes. It's universal. Doesn't matter what country you're in, what language you speak, what materials you use. The concept of the chair is exactly the same. He truly was a smart guy, Plato. That's the way he viewed a tree. To him, what was a tree? The beauty of a tree was the concept of something bearing fruit from the ground, that you plant a seed and something grows. It was insignificant to him. If an orange tree, an apple tree, he didn't appreciate that. Because there's hundreds of different kinds of tree. To him, eternal, the fact that something is eternal, that it lasts forever, and universal. That it's universal. Those were the two concepts that to him bore the greatest truth. was that something was eternal and universal. So he had to live life with dual vision because he understood all these beautiful concepts, these abstract ideas, and that's where he liked to live his life. And yet, the reality was that all around him he saw physical expressions. And he didn't like what he saw. He didn't want to value the physical expression over the abstract idea. And this is what he preached to Aristotle. This was Plato's idea. There's once a story told, this is actually the Rebbe is telling this. The Rebbe said this in one of his talks. Said that there was a story told about Aristotle. Aristotle, who was also a great philosopher, a Greek philosopher, was once caught doing something abhorrent, terribly low and disgusting, something you would never imagine Aristotle would do. I believe it was something promiscuous involving women, but the Rebbe doesn't say that, obviously. So his students came over to Aristotle and they said, "Sir, how is it possible that you, such a gifted, intelligent person, could engage in such debauchery, in such activity? It doesn't make sense." So he said, "When I'm involved in logic and books, I'm Aristotle. And when I'm not Aristotle." Very simple. He took what his teacher Plato told him. That he lived, who was he truly? He was a man of ideas. So as long as he was in the world of ideas, that was him. And you could hold him to a high status and a high office, and his conduct was becoming because this was who he was. Once he left that portion of his life had no significance, had no meaning. So whatever behavior he engaged in, whatever he did, didn't matter. Didn't reflect on who he truly was. This is outside his identity. And you'd be surprised how many people wish they had that. Oh, I wish I could just not be myself for 10 minutes. A license to do whatever I want with any ramifications. And the Rebbe continues and says, some people think they can do that. They feel that they can live their life in one reality, and in that reality they are pristine, they're perfect. They study Torah, they perform mitzvot, traditions, they do the works, they're kind, good, so on and so forth. And then they go on vacation. But when I'm on vacation, I'm off. I'm not just off from work. I'm off from life. I'm off from my responsibilities, my obligations, my conduct. I'm on vacation. That concept of being able to live life in a dual fashion, that concept starts and originates with Plato. A Greek concept. But one you don't hear about often, because the Greeks did much worse things. So the other things get more attention. But you have to start off, you have to give Plato credit. Because valuing the abstract is important. It is important. If you can appreciate the abstract, you could use that to appreciate spirituality, to appreciate concepts that don't necessarily express themselves in a physical fashion. The place where he got lost was where he thought that they were two separate worlds. That's where he made his mistake. He started off right. The abstract is beautiful. It is important. And it gives us a sense of things that we don't necessarily see right in front of us. But he didn't know how to fuse the two worlds. So to him, the abstract was never expressed and appreciated in the physical life that he led. That's where he made his mistake. Judaism is exactly the opposite. Jewish life, of course, appreciates the abstract and appreciating the things that we can't see but we can feel, that we can believe in, that we can sense, very powerful things. But they're all there to guide us and infuse us to live our lives in a very practical, real sense. This is the ultimate. This. You know, when you pray, and in our traditional davening, in the liturgy, we talk about angels all the time. So sometimes people get the wrong message. They think that we're jealous of the angels, we we look at them and, oh, they're better than us, they're holier than us, and so on and so forth. That's not true. That's not why we incorporate their prayers when we daven. We incorporate their prayers because when an angel goes up and says something, they are praying from a pure, pristine place. They have no other inclinations. Nothing that's telling them to check their phone for text messaging or wonder where the girl sitting in front of me got her shoes, or whether the rabbi is going to finish with this concept, or he's going to go 1 more minute or 2 more minutes, or how great Dina's hors d'oeuvres are after Shabbat Express, first Friday of every month.
Very good.
So therefore, we take prayers from angels because they're effective. But we're not jealous of their status because they can't achieve transformation, and we can. They were created for us, not the other way around. To the extent that in the Zohar, the basis and foundation for a Kabbalistic concept, it says that God promises he would not enter into the heavenly Jerusalem until Israel enters into the earthly Jerusalem. Which means to say that, yes, there is a dual reality. There is. There is a physical reality, and there's a spiritual reality. Without question, we all know that. Not everything that we believe in we see expressed clearly and physically. But the ultimate, it's right here in front of you. And everything that exists above, beyond us, is there to guide and inspire and motivate us to do what we have to do right here, down here in this world. So we're not striving to live 2 lives. We're striving to fuse them into one. To take that reality that we know exists and live our lives in this reality together with that knowledge. It's not always an easy concept. No, it's not an easy concept at all, without question. And it's very easy to err on one side or the other. And for most people, they compromise by giving up the abstract reality. They simply take life as they see it in front of them, and that's it. And we, before you joined us, we talked about it could be in a marriage, it could be in a job, it could be in a relationship with your children. So the analogy that we used with a job would be to say that, yes, I had dreams when I was a kid or when I went to college, but life, the reality that's been presented to me has kind of forced me to curtail those dreams, and I'm just doing the job that I can do right now. And that's important. You do have to live in this reality. You do have to make the best of it. But you don't have to give up on that other reality. Find ways that you can fuse the two together. If you can't earn a living, if you can't make enough money with that dream job, find a way you can volunteer, or a hobby, or something that you can do where you still keep it alive, you still keep it sustained. If your marriage isn't exactly the way you dreamed it would be, then try to find a way to change that relationship a little bit. It may not ever mirror or mimic that pristine view that you had. Maybe it was a little naive, maybe it wasn't. But don't give up on it. You do have to adapt. You do have to compromise. Same thing is with our children. You're right, your children aren't exactly what you expected or what you imagined, and raising children is exactly what you expected or imagined, and maybe you're not the parent you wish you could be. You have to change to respond to events on the ground. You have multiple children, each one responds to something differently. You've got to change and be effective in different ways. But you don't have to give up on the other reality as well. Those dreams, those fantasies, you can still nurture them. Don't let them consume you, but don't simply give up on them either. And the same thing is in our spiritual lives. Yes, we live in a physical world. Yes, we value this physical world. Yes, action, the deed, is what counts most in Jewish tradition. Not speech, not thought, not even prayer. Action is what counts most. That's the way our tradition is guided. And whether somebody will tell you, I'm a Jew at heart, that's beautiful. And that shouldn't be undervalued in any way. But it's not enough. It's simply not enough. This is a religion, a faith built around action. Because in this world, what speaks the loudest? actions. And that's where the faith was created. Judaism was created for this world. If it was a religion that was created for angels, then action wouldn't be so important. Other things would be important. But that's not the way it is. There are no Jewish people outside of this physical world. People used to ask the Rebbe if there are aliens, extraterrestrial creatures. And the Rebbe would tell them, maybe there are, maybe there aren't. But essentially, it's irrelevant to me because there are no Jewish people outside of this world. It says, Torah loy bashamayim hi. The Torah does not exist in the heavens. It was not created for the heavens. It was created for earth. And earth is this planet. Not the solar system, not this galaxy, this planet. So anything outside this earth may exist, may not. But Judaism was created for us human beings right here in this planet. So how do we look to fuse these two lives together? How do we make sure that we don't flip off one end or the other, become totally abstract and disillusioned with reality, which can easily happen, easily. Especially if someone is really appreciating Judaism and spirituality and they get caught up in it. Maybe they leave their family, or they leave their job, or they start praying all day, or they start running away from their other responsibilities. They can totally get caught up in that, and that's unhealthy. And of course, we know the opposite, where we get caught up with materialism. God knows we have plenty of examples of that. And whatever exists outside of this reality is irrelevant to that individual. So this, in the Torah portion that we're living with this week, of course we try to live with a little piece of the Torah every week, and that's what the portion is. So it's not really the Torah portion that you read on Shabbos, it's the Torah portion for the week. In fact, when my daughter, Chana, who's 4 years old, learns the Torah in school, she learns Parshat HaShavua, which means the portion of the week. Not the portion of Shabbos, the portion of the week. Because the goal is that you'll live with that portion throughout the entire week. You learn a little on Monday, on Sunday, Tuesday. And then when you hear it Saturday in the synagogue, if you go to synagogue, that's just a review. That's just a review. But you've been, exactly like in the Chayena book. So, this week's portion is Pekudei. And it's a very interesting portion because it's a repeat. Or Vayakel, sorry. Vayakel. Next week is Pekudei. It's a repeat. The entire portion has already been recited. Only a few weeks ago. The portion comes and explains all about how to construct the traveling temple in the desert. After the Jewish people were given the Torah on Mount Sinai, they sinned with the golden calf. Finally, God forgives them. Moses goes back up the mountain, and he says to them, all right, I'll give you another pair of tablets. Gives them another pair of tablets, and they come down, and everyone's happy. And you know what? Hashem says, I think you need to build me a temple. What's the matter, Ham?
The portions are combined portions this week, yeah?
They are combined portions, yes. But I'm referring to Vayakel. The concept I'm trying to make is from Vayakel. Yes, they are combined portions this week. So God says, very interesting, he responds to what happens on the ground. There was a golden calf. Why was there a golden calf? Because the Jews miscalculated. They thought Moses went up the mountain for 40 days, 40 nights. We've counted 40 days, 40 nights. He's not here. We can't live without a physical Moses, some kind of physical expression in this world that will help keep us connected. So they built something physical, a golden calf. Now, of course, they were mistaken. You shouldn't build any images, any idols. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But after Hashem forgives them and Moses comes down with the new tablets, Hashem says, you know what? Maybe they're right. They need some kind of physical place where they can feel a greater expression of godliness. And that's why the temple is built. It's very interesting. So again, something positive can come from something negative. Turned that period into a benefit instead of simply a deficit.
Never heard it put that way.
Yeah. So We were going to build a temple, a traveling temple, and Hashem gives Moses detailed instructions on how to do everything. It takes up ultimately 2 portions, Teruma and Tetzaveh. It goes through everything in great detail. Comes along this portion, and everything gets repeated, almost to the letter. Now, in some books, when something gets repeated, it's a little bit boring, but you can chalk it up to artistic flair. The writer wants to make sure that you understood the concept, or so on and so forth. I know that if you're a speaker and you're speaking to people and you repeat yourself too many times, you're going to get this response. So we try not to do that. But one thing's for sure, the Torah does not engage in that kind of activity. Doesn't. The Torah is extremely precise and specific. The Torah explains detailed concepts that could be elaborated on for days in a few words, even in letters, even in little crowns. Of course, the Torah font, the Ashuri font, has serifs, little crowns or lines that stick out on top of the letters. And Rabbi Akiva, the famed rabbi who didn't even read Aleph Beis until he was 40, was noted as a master interpreter of even the little lines on top of the letters. He used to learn things from the fact that this word, this letter, had extra lines on them. So the Torah is extremely precise and specific. Every letter is expounded upon. And here, the Torah repeats an entire portion. The obvious question is why? What are we looking to achieve by repeating this entire portion? Now, easily the Torah could have said, listen, Moses could have said to the Jewish people, remember what I explained to you back there about all of those detailed instructions in the temple and the tabernacle? I just want you to know, those are really important. I meant those literally. They're very important. Each part is very specific. You've got to keep to it. Make sure you don't deviate in any way, shape, or form. Because, yeah, that's true. There are parts of the Torah that are not specific and they're not, physically relevant. But Moses could have said, hey, this part, just follow it to the T. He didn't do that. He went over the entire thing. He said, and the candelabra, here's how we're going to make it. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And the altar, as we're going to make it. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And maybe the Jews started falling asleep on him like my Jews do. Or maybe they didn't, and that's why he didn't get the message that he was repeating himself. Because it's very important to have people in your crowd that fall asleep when you speak. It's like
You're very easy for me to do, right?
No, it's very good, because then it lets you know where you're at. Instant polling. You don't need to have a handheld device. You just look at them and say, "Whoop." All right. But he doesn't do that. Torah specifically goes and repeats every single aspect of the story of the sanctuaries because it's trying to tell us something very valuable. First of all, the temple is a very important place. Yes, it's true, you can pray anywhere at any time, but the Jews needed a temple. And do you know why they needed a temple? What did the temple signify to them? Well, you look at the commandment to build a temple. God says to the Jewish people, make for me a temple and I will dwell in them. What's the obvious grammatical mistake here?
Yeah.
Why does it say I will dwell in them? It should have said I will dwell in it. Because through the temple, God will ultimately come to dwell inside of each and every one of the people. This temple is meant to signify and express here in this physical world the abstract, the spiritual. That's what it's all about. This is the ultimate expression of what Judaism is all about. It's the temple. Nothing more, nothing less. I gave you 10 commandments. Why did I give you 10 commandments? Why did I give you this whole faith? What'd you need it for? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they used to put on tefillin. Sarah, she lit Shabbat candles. They had circumcision. What do you need this whole massive ceremony on Mount Sinai with theatrical productions, lights, and smoke, and people going up and down. What do you need it for? And a big booming voice, and Charlton Heston on the top of it. What do you need it for? Is it really necessary? If they already did it before, why change it? It seemed to be good, but there was a big problem with the actions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, and Rachel. You see, when they did mitzvot, when they did commandments and traditions, they simply did something nice, and then they went on their merry way. The candles that they used to light for Shabbat, they didn't have any special significance. The tefillin, the hide that they used for the tefillin, you could throw it away afterwards. Literally take it and throw it in the garbage. And not because they were insensitive. It didn't have any value. Because their actions did not transform anything in this physical world. So they simply lived dual lives. They lived the abstract, and they lived the physical, the real. Maybe a little better than Plato, but ultimately they were never able to fuse the two. God says, that is not what I intended when I created the world. I created the world to fuse these two perspectives together. So I'm going to make a big ceremony on Mount Sinai, and I'm going to show everyone that here, God's voice, God's words are being written down, expressed here into this physical world. That's the point of Judaism. That's what it's all about. It's about taking our tradition and transforming. And what's going to be the greatest expression of that? That a physical structure made of copper and gold and wood and ornate tapestries, where there'll be animals and people and all these different things. A physical structure is where you're going to feel me most. Not in an open field, not on the top of a pristine mountain, not on the Himalayas, not on a beautiful Caribbean beach, which is where I feel very spiritual. No. You're going to feel God most in this physical temple. And even more so in the temple that will ultimately be built in Jerusalem. So, number one, the temple is not just another story in our history. It's the story in our history. The Beis HaMikdash, the temple built in Jerusalem, is not just a significant place. It's the source and expression of everything we're trying to do here in the United States. In Florida, in New York, in California, in Africa, and everywhere. Everything you're trying to do, you're trying to achieve in your life, is expressed at the temple, at that Western Wall. Because when you go to that Western Wall and you stand there and you see physical stones and stones on the floor, and you feel a spirituality that you don't feel anywhere else, and I believe that because I've gone with many people and they felt it. Jewish and non-Jewish. And if you don't believe me, ask the mayor. That tells you that these are not two worlds. That Plato was wrong. He was heading in the right direction, but he didn't quite make it. These are not two worlds with two views and two perspectives. This is one world, and we just have to fuse these realities. And here, look, it's possible. Look, when you go to this physical place and you hit these stones and you touch them with your lips, you feel something special, something different. That's the point of what you're trying to achieve. So, that's the first reason why we go ahead and we repeat this portion, to emphasize the significance of what this temple represents. But that's not the only reason. The other reason is that there are two sanctuaries. The sanctuaries, the building plans for the temple are repeated twice because there are two temples. Two temples. There is a temple above and a temple below. A spiritual temple and a physical temple. The same way there is a spiritual Herzl and a spiritual Mendy and a spiritual June. There's a spiritual side that we have and a physical side that we have. Everything. Every chair, every inanimate object, every animated object, every leaf, everything has a spiritual side and a physical side. A soul and a body. And sometimes those are fused together in one, and sometimes part of it remains above, and so on and so forth. And we could draw pretty graphics and diagrams, and everyone go, ah. But the reality is that everything has that in this world. Everything. So the Mishkan, the temple, also has these two dynamics. It has a spiritual temple and a physical temple. So the spiritual temple might have, more spirituality. Maybe that's some kind of expression in the higher worlds. I don't know. And frankly, it's more or less irrelevant to me. What's most important to me is the physical temple. And do you know why God tells Moses to repeat this portion? Because he wants to make a very important statement. You might think, Jewish people, that when I told Moses about building this temple, I was talking about an abstract idea. That we're going to build a temple in the spiritual world, and through prayer, and through good deeds, and through thoughts, and maybe the angels will occupy that temple, and the angels will serve God there, and they'll bring up offerings, and who knows what that means, and so on and so forth. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a spiritual world for God. No, that is not the intention. The intention is that you actually go out, take a hammer, and knock a piece of wood with a nail, and you take a piece of gold, and you chisel it and turn it into a candelabra, and you put this beautiful tapestry over this tent, and that physical place, that's where I'm going to rest. And that's why God has to repeat himself. Because this is truly a novel idea. It is truly a novel idea. And the Jewish people themselves have not fully accepted what they are being told to do. And furthermore, when the Jewish people were traveling through the desert, a cloud of glory used to sit on top of the temple, some sort of cloud. When the cloud moved, it was their sign that it was time for the Jewish people to move. Get up, move on to the next place. Remember, they're wandering around 40 years in the desert. When you look at a map where they went, the first thing you do is laugh, because it's literally laughable. But basically, they're sitting over here. Israel's right over here. Instead of going into Israel, they go like this, and then they go all the way around. They enter Israel like that. That's what they do. That's what it means wandering through the desert. They circle the entire Israel.
You're right-footed, you take an extra step towards that way. So it took a long time to figure out that the stride was off.
And once they did, they started to go back. That's interesting. It's an idea. So the Jewish people really had a tough time buying into this. And that's why Hashem goes ahead and tells Moses, you need to repeat this portion. And you need to emphasize this is what we're actually going to do. Hashem instructs the Jewish people to build this, build that, build that. And lo and behold, they went out and they built this, and they built that, and they built X, and the candelabra, and the altar, and the holies of holies, and an ark for the tablets. All of that they built. So get the message, get the hint. This is not a spiritual place. This is not a spiritual world that we live in through abstract ideas, through philosophical novelties. This is not a place where Plato and Aristotle can simply go ahead and think about all of the nice things in the world and in practice act in promiscuous, permissive ways. This is not the world that was given to us. The world that was given to us is a place where we, through our actions, can literally create a spiritual experience. And that is still to this very day a novel idea for many people. For many people. The idea that you can believe that through sitting down at this table, I can take this table and turn it into something else. I can take this table and turn it into something else. The concept that when people see a Torah walking through a synagogue, they stop and they give it a kiss. Why do they give it a kiss?
Special.
It's special. But what is it? It's a piece of animal hide. Now, I know people that kiss every piece of meat. Those people really, they need to talk to someone. But the reality is that it's a piece of meat. It's animal hide. And I know I do a workshop that shows everyone how it's done. And I've got animal hide right there in the garage. That's what the Torah is. Now, maybe the people kiss because they don't know. They think it's gold. They think that underneath that mantle, that beautiful covering, there's gold. And people like gold, so they think they're kissing gold. Hey, and it says in Tehillim that the Torah is as valuable as gold. So maybe that's what they think. They read that verse, Herzl, and they said, maybe there's gold under there. That's why we're kissing it. I mean, why would you kiss the Torah? Maybe you should kiss the ideas that the Torah represents, kiss the philosophies that the Torah represents.
Aren't you partially doing that too?
Through touch, Put yourself in Plato's shoes. Would he ever walk by and kiss the tablets? A piece of stone? No, it's just stone. Maybe if he could kiss an idea and wrap his head around an idea, then he would do it. But remember, once it expresses itself in a piece of stone, it's just a piece of stone. It has no significance to him. Even if he took all of his beautiful ideas and he started to write them out, they would have no significance.
Towards our gift from God.
Towards our gift, yeah, absolutely, is a gift from God. Not the ideas. That piece of animal hide is holy. That is a gift from God. That piece of animal hide. It's not by coincidence that so many of our most prized possessions are literally written on animal hide. Mezuzahs, tefillin, Torah scrolls. Because when you talk about something very material and very physical, this is one way to see it. This reminds us that we are here to do exactly that, to take a table, to take a piece of animal hide, and to turn it into a bima, into a synagogue. And I would say that we've gotten the message somewhat, because we do respect the synagogue. When people of any walk of faith, any level of expression of Judaism, there's a new term for saying it. We don't want to say sects. So now people say streams. There are streams in Judaism. And actually, it's nice. It's not bad because, you can see all the rivers flow into one big body of water. So all the different streams of Judaism, if we're being very PC, people do respect and appreciate a synagogue. You go into a shul, you feel a little different. You see a table, a bima, you know that it's just a table, but you treat it a little differently. You see a book, a siddur, a machzor, or some sort of prayer book, you understand. This is not just another book. But what about when you go home? What about when you go to your office? What do you see then? You just see a computer, some water, and a break room with cannolis. What do you see when you go home? You see your family, you see the television, the couch, maybe some ice cream, the remote. Or these days you usually see 3 or 4 remotes. You see my car. And that's all you see. That's all it is. And that part of the message has not fully been translated yet. That's where we haven't gotten the message yet. Now, if you sat down and you spoke to somebody, say, that you can really make your home a spiritual place and make your office a spiritual place and make it a more positive, productive place and environment, what would they tell you? A normal, guy or girl with their head on their shoulders, thinking straight, they would tell you, yeah, of course I believe that. Do you practice it? Not so much. Not so much. There, the abstract has not yet expressed itself in the physical. Do you want to ask a question?
No.
No problem. We know CPR, both of us, so you're fine. There, we still have work to do. That is the realms that we have not yet fully conquered. And the reason we haven't is because we haven't found a way to merge those two realities. We're still being fed a reality by society that says, in my home, I do whatever I want. I do whatever I want. It's my home. Or a reality that says, at the office, all that matters is that I make as much money as possible. That's my most important job here. That's what I am here to achieve. Nothing more, nothing less. And as long as those realities are what's being fed to us and what matters to us most, then naturally, we're not going to be able to merge that with the reality that says, in your home, you're not your own man. You're not your own man in the bathroom. You're not your own man. You have obligations. You have responsibilities. You have a calling to live up to. You have an objective. You have a goal. You have something to achieve everywhere at every moment. Doesn't matter if you're here or if you're on vacation. Life never stops. You don't stop breathing. You don't stop achieving. That's the way it goes. But that's a hard message to translate in a society where it's whatever I want. And the same thing at work. You're not at work simply to make as much money as possible. Yes, you do have to support yourself and you have to feed your family. No question. That's not the ultimate goal of why you're working. We work to be productive, to contribute to society. That's why a person was created to work, to contribute to society. And society itself will subsidize the work that you're doing so that you can go home and feed your family. Sometimes, most of the time, whatever you're getting paid will not be reflective of what you're contributing to society. And that's just life. That's your obstacle or that's my obstacle. You know, I may feel that I'm contributing to society more than some businessman that's getting paid 10 times what I am. I feel I'm contributing to society more than they are. And you know what? I may be right.
Always about me.
It's true. And you may be right in the same way. So yes, you do have to have a job that supports yourself, but that is not the goal of why you're going to work. It's not. If it was, technically, you'd make enough money to support your family and then you'd be done.
That was the goal. I would be working at the JCC.
Yeah, there you go. That's absolutely right. And I probably wouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing. So, being able to merge those realities at work and at home is not an easy task. But you have to start by reprogramming why you're doing the things that you're doing in the first place. And once you start to take a step back and you say to yourself, look at this temple. God says build a temple in a desert, a physical place. And take all of these physical, materialistic things. Gold. Everybody loves gold, right? You know what you're going to use gold for? You're not going to use it to build Saddam's palace. You're not going to use it for your new teeth. You're not going to use it for anything else but to make a spiritual oasis. That's what you're going to use it for. If you could take gold, something that drives people mad, that people literally will kill for, and turn that into something spiritual, you could take anything and turn it into something spiritual. In any place and any time. And that's the mistake that Plato was making. And that's what we're here specifically to correct. In our world, actions speak more than words, more than ideas, more than philosophies. In Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, it says that if you have a tree, you have the roots of the tree, things that you don't necessarily see, and you have the branches, the trunk, the parts of the tree that are visible, right? A man's actions are like roots, and a man's ideas and philosophies, those are like branches, trunks, and so on and so forth. So the Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers, goes on to say, if someone has lots of ideas and philosophies and great thoughts and so on and so forth, but they have very few actual actions that express those ideas, you know what kind of tree you've got? You got a tree with big, beautiful branches and so on and so forth, but the roots are pretty small. You get a big, strong wind that comes by, he's gone. Oh, we see got those kind of people all the time, right? They're all talk, but the minute something comes to push, something hits the fan, they're out of there, right? Then you have those that are men of small words. They don't have such grandiose ideas, they're not huge philosophers, but they're doers. They act and they get things done. And that's a tree with real big roots, real big roots. Maybe the branches aren't that huge and it doesn't get that much notoriety, but you better believe that tree's going to be here for a long time. Nothing's going to uproot that tree because the actions have it rooted deep down right here in this earth, in this world. We all have moments where we get inspired. We get inspired, we start to make plans and ideas. Wow, I'm going to change my life, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
But people tend to listen to those people sometimes more than the people that show with their actions.
Well, that's their mistake. Ideas are okay. There's no problem with ideas. And that's where I'm going with this. We all get those motivations. And we come up with those ideas. We're always got great ideas coming, right? And we run to the self-help section. You ever heard the story about the person that walks into the library and he walks over to someone and says, excuse me, can you help me find the self-help section? He says, I could, but that would defeat the purpose. The reality is that we get these wonderful ideas, we get these motivations and these inspirations, but what happens? They die out. The wind comes and they fade away because they were never rooted in action. That's why resolutions are so powerful. A hachlata. The Rebbe used to always say, you have the motivation, take a resolution. Even if it's just for a week, for a month. I'm feeling good today. I woke up, I had a good day. I'm making a resolution to do something. Because that feeling will pass. The wind will come and it'll change. But if you have a resolution, if you've committed yourself to doing an action, that action has you rooted. And every time you do that action, it'll bring back some of those positive feelings that you had at that moment of inspiration. That's how you merge and fuse these two worlds. You don't have one view or another view. They're merged together because the minute these ideas come to you, right, you're Mr. Plato all of a sudden. You're going to do X, you're going to do Y, you're going to Z. You pull it right away into reality. You say, here's what I'm going to do today, or what I'm starting to do tomorrow for 1 week or for 2 or for the next year. It doesn't have to be huge. But in some physical way, you've started to merge these two worlds, then you will see success. Because let's be honest, Plato and Greek philosophy, it's gone. It doesn't exist today. It's gone. Yeah, he's celebrated in poetry, and maybe we make some plays about him. And if you're on the debate team, they're going to make you learn a lot of his works. But the reality is, there's no Greek philosophy today that's being practiced by millions of people around the world. But the Jewish philosophy is still going. It's still going strong. And that should speak loud and clear to all of us. So, this world has two types of beauty. It has spiritual beauty and it has physical beauty. And yes, spirituality is beautiful. But the beauty that we've been put here to bring about is a physical beauty. That's what you were created for. If it was just about the spiritual stuff, they wouldn't need us. God's got hundreds of thousands of angels, and I'm sure, with their white wings and the orbs on top of their head, they do a great job. But they can't do the job that we do. So we were created for one purpose specifically, to transform and to change this physical world into the spiritual world. So let's get on our task. Let's get the job done. And then we'll see success. Not only in our spiritual lives, but even in our professional lives, in our relationships with our family, with our partners, and so on. And you know what? All of those dreams and those fantasies that we had, slowly they'll start to express themselves in the reality that we live every day. Next week, we're going to do a very interesting discussion. We're going to talk about, can a Jew live with questions? Something that Herzl always asks me. Can you live with questions? It's a very, very powerful discussion because the reality is the more you learn, the more you don't know. So how do you sustain yourself with all the questions that you might have? I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. As always, you can email your questions to askmendy, askmendy, @gmail.com. 3.5 weeks is Passover, Pesach. Make sure you have a Seder to go to. If you don't, you're welcome to join us at the Mainsail Suites Hotel for our 5-star Seder. That's April 6th and 7th at 7:30 p.m. Information on our website, ChabadSouthTampa.com. Have a wonderful evening.